So once again, good evening to everyone, and thank you for participating in this evening's Community Conversations event entitled Views from Both Ends of the CMP Corridor. It is the Lincoln County Democrats' pleasure to share information about this important question. If you haven't been paying attention, you will be shortly, because there are lots of mailers that are going out for either side and lots of TV ads. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to present both sides of the issue, the yes and the no. And to that point, we are going to have a process which I'll describe to you in 1 second. My name, by the way, is Jan John. I'm part of the Lincoln County Democrats, and I lead the outreach effort here for the Lincoln County Democrats. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got 4 panelists, 2 for each side, 2 representing the yes side, 2 representing the no side. These are subject matter experts, people with varying experiences on either side of the position and in supporting entities. I'll introduce these people as we go, and each team will begin with the yeses, will present their rationale, their reason for why you would want to vote yes on question 1. Following that, immediately, we'll go right to the no guys, and they will present why they're believing that no is the right answer for responding to this question 1 as you vote in November. Once the presentations are complete and both sides have some presentation material to share, we're going to go through and make sure that we've got some questions, and we want to submit those, or they have been submitted, and we're going to present those to each side, the yeses or nos. Okay, so I think it's time for us to head out and begin our session. Let me first introduce to you the yes panel. And to that end, we have Sandy Howard as a volunteer for the grassroots effort that is opposed to the CMP Corridor. She's an 8th generation Mainer, but she is not 8 generations old. She's been a Maine guide for 25 years and a professor of music education. She's the director of the nonprofit Say No to the NECEC and the No CMP Corridor. She will be discussing rationale for taking a yes vote. Her teammate in this regard will be Becky Layton Bartovics, who is a member of the Sierra Club Maine's executive committee, and she's been on that committee since 2007, and now serves as a volunteer leader, as well as a member of the Council of Club Leaders to the Sierra Club. So she's very active in that area. She's worked in water conservation and energy efficiency businesses, and currently has a small solar-powered family farm on North Haven Island. She's been elected to local government as a former chair of the Penobscot Bay Alliance, and was appointed by Governor Baldacci to the Joint Use Planning Commission. So we've got some good experience there on the yes side. So what we'd like to do is now turn the event over to Sandra and Becky for their remarks, and I think they've got some presentation material.
Great, thanks to Jan, and thanks to Autumn and the Lincoln County Democrats for inviting us here for this discussion tonight. Jan, can you see that screen share?
Yes, I can.
Awesome, great. So Becky and I are going to be talking tonight about why we hope that Mainers will vote yes on 1 to reject the CMP corridor. So just a quick orientation on grassroots and how we got here. In 2018, I attended a very small informational meeting in the Forks, Maine, up in the Jackman area, and I was told by NECEC's CEO that it was a done deal. And I thought it was strange that this huge infrastructure project was not well known around the state. And it was at that time that a few other river guides and I started a Facebook group called Say No to NECEC, so we could educate the public about this massive project. Of course, it's been 3 years and our grassroots membership has grown to over 10,000 people. We've had our members testifying at all of Maine's approval agencies and at the federal level too. We've been at the legislature. And of course, our volunteers collected signatures, which is why I established No CMP Corridor, which is our grassroots PAC. And now we've evolved to going to a yes vote on one this November 2nd to reject the CMP corridor. So here's the question. You can read it here. This is what you'll see on your ballot. And by the way, early voting has begun. I'm going to take this question apart a bit here. And of course, I'm imagining there'll be some follow-up questions as well. So question 1 does 3 things. It requires legislative approval for high impact transmission lines of 50 miles or longer. This would be a 345 kV line, a direct current line, not like what you see on an average telephone pole. These would be 100 to 120 foot monopoles, bringing power directly from Quebec to the transfer station in Lewiston. So the majority of the power goes to Massachusetts. This will not be an upgrade to the power reliability for Mainers. So 50 miles or longer, high impact transmission lines are already defined in Maine statute that way. Question 1 would also reinforce the constitutional requirement for 2/3 legislative approval for projects traversing public lands. Now, this is already in statute, thanks to another initiative in 1993. So this is merely a polite reminder that this process must be followed for projects traversing public lands. And the CMP corridor in its current form is scheduled to cross a mile of Maine public lands in the West Forks region. However, just in August, Justice Michaela Murphy invalidated that lease. So when we put this question forward in 2020, we didn't know how the court would rule. So we wanted to make sure we had it covered, and that's in here too. So again, this is merely a reminder for what needs to happen. And unfortunately, the Bureau of Parks and Lands did not follow that process by going to the legislature for approval, like was done with many other transmission line projects. And the third component of question 1 is to protect the valuable Upper Kennebec region area from commercial exploitation. So how would we vote? I thought I'd put this up here. This is a neutral source. It's Ballotpedia. A yes vote supports the prohibition of construction of high impact transmission lines in the Upper Kennebec region. It requires a 2/3 vote for crossing public lands, or a majority vote for high impact transmission lines. A no vote would allow the NECEC project to continue and not require the 2/3 vote for high impact transmission lines. So our grassroots coordination has also brought us to other partners. And I'm here tonight with Becky, which is an honor because Sierra Club Maine is one of our biggest partners, including other partners like Natural Resources Council of Maine, the AMC, Forest Ecology Network of Maine, Environment Maine, Trout Unlimited, Maine Audubon, Friends of Sebago Lake, Maine Rivers, and the Native Fish Coalition, just to name a few. Also, national organizations have gotten in on this because, frankly, this is the largest infrastructure in Maine's history since the development of the Maine Turnpike. This is a massive infrastructure project. A lot of environmental organizations are finding lots of problems with it. So Patagonia has joined, Food and Water Watch, and also our friends at North American Megadams Resistance Alliance. And you'll hear a bit more about some of their efforts from Becky in a bit. So here's a bit more detail on the public lands that were leased to CMP, which were found to be in violation of the Maine Constitution. This is a joint resolution from the legislature. This was the last act of the current legislature saying that they're seeing this as a substantial alteration of the lands. They demand an opportunity to vote in the House on each side. So I just wanted to bring that up. And just next week, the Maine Department of Environmental Protection is going to meet because the DEP permit is in peril because of this lease being invalidated. And this is here just a quote of Justice Murphy's ruling. And Jan, if it's okay with you, I might just send this along to you after. That way, if people wanted to read in more in depth, or if they want to click some links, maybe you could send that along. So the corridor no longer connects, right? It's 145 miles long with 53.5 miles going in a region that has no industrial infrastructure. So if you break a line of a mile, then how's that power going to get to Massachusetts? We also have to remember that Massachusetts put out a call for proposals, and they received about 45 proposals from various energy utility companies. And Northern Pass in New Hampshire was originally selected. It would go through the White Mountain National Forest. And after about a decade of review, New Hampshire regulators determined that no actual greenhouse gas emission reductions would be realized if it was not a new source of hydropower. And by the way, the source of the hydropower is the same exact source for the CMP Corridor as the New Hampshire project. Also in Massachusetts, the Attorney General Maura Healey expressed concern that Hydro-Quebec's contract language left open the possibility that hydropower already being sold by Hydro-Quebec would be shifted to Massachusetts, basically because they're willing to pay a premium for that. So this very project was examined in New Hampshire, and there's no actual greenhouse gas emission reductions. That's a key point to keep in mind. Our friends at NRCM also believe that the CMP line is a bad deal for Maine. It will not reduce climate changing pollution. It may increase it because of the shell game that happens with power being diverted from one region to another. Of course, it would cut through Western Maine. And by the way, in Western Maine, it's the last contiguous temperate forest east of the Mississippi. This is a globally significant forest. Is it a working forest for logging? Yes. Do those clear cuts grow back? Yes. Will the CMP corridor's clear cut grow back? If it's going through, no. But if we vote a yes on November 2nd, those trees will go back. Becky's been talking a little bit about how the CMP corridor would jeopardize or stymie in-state renewable energy projects. And of course, the bottom line is Center Maine Power, which is owned by Avangrid, which is also, they own gas companies too. They're owned by Spain and Qatar, Iberdrola. And Hydro-Quebec is owned by the province of Quebec. So foreign corporations stand to make billions of dollars while the benefits to Maine are really in the pennies. In 2019, LD 640 was brought forward by former Senator Brownie Carson to ask for an independent climate analysis on the impacts of the CMP corridor. That study would have been done long before construction would have begun. And you know, if those claims that CMP is making were found to be true, they might have very well gained more support for the project. But unfortunately, CMP spent more money on an army of lobbyists than it would have even cost to have the study. So we're wondering what they were afraid of. Let's talk about segment 1 alone. So segment 1 is that region from the Quebec border down to the Forks region. This is the 53.5 miles the corridor would cross. It would cross 480 freshwater wetlands, 280 rivers, streams, or brooks, also containing cold water fisheries habitat for the last stronghold of native brook trout in the country. It has Maine State Heritage fish waters and also 2 Class AA outstanding river segments, being the Kennebec River and the Dead River. These are regions that are not having that industrialization or commercial exploitation. We want to keep it that way. Of course, it would have impacts on waterfowl and wading bird habitats and major vernal pools, not to mention a degrading impact forever on Maine's public lands. So at the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, CMP testified that they never considered impacts on 4-season recreation like snowmobiling, fishing, other hiking, also economic impacts that it would have to recreational tourism. So that's my industry. I work up there as a guide. And basically, if you think about taking a product that you're trying to draw people to and you degrade it or cause irreparable harm, you're damaging that product, which is really Maine's brand. People come from all over the world to see this region. The other thing that I think is very concerning, especially with what we've seen for PG&E out in California, with the high impact transmission line fires that were caused, we have to remember that the first 70 miles of this line has no full-time fire and rescue, and it's in a very remote area. So the Maine State Federation of Firefighters delivered a letter of concern about that very thing, that if anything were to go to fire, we would have a huge, huge crisis on our hands. So here are some pictures of segment 1 near the Johnson Mountain area. It's hard to tell here with measurements, but it's 100-foot wide through this region, and the DEP's confirmed that. Here's a region of a widened corridor. This is Mosquito Mountain, and to your right is Lake Moxie. This is a view from the Bigelows looking into Upper Franklin and Somerset County, and you can see that swath causing a scar right through Western Maine. It's hard to miss.
Andy, we got to move along. I think I've got 2 minutes left.
Sorry, Becky, I'm moving along.
That's okay.
120-foot monopoles here, so well above the 45-foot tree cover. Thanks, Becky.
Yeah, and you can go to the next one. I just want to recognize that we are all living on Wabanaki territory. And quickly run through this. There were no Maine's different than New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York, because our Army Corps of Engineers doesn't like to do EISs, and it was an easy sell for CMP and Hydro-Quebec to get a backdoor, backroom, opaque permitting from the Army Corps. Nevertheless, there are some requirements by the Army Corps that CMP is not following, partly because there's nobody to enforce them. Jay Clement from the Army Corps of Engineers told me that they have haphazard enforcement. So they don't have to do anything, even though they have negotiated to, for instance, have a narrower corridor. They've managed to cut it wider than they're supposed to in what they've cut already. Next slide. If you want to do the next one, I can't do it. Quickly, we've already gone through that they were owned. The only thing is that they never testified. Hydro-Quebec never testified to any of the promises that they have made to the public. So they never testified before any of the agencies, the PUC, the DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers on how much clean energy they are going to bring, what the cost is to the ratepayers, and they haven't actually promised to provide power during peak loading, because they probably will have to provide it for their own people at the same time. Go ahead. I just want to say one other thing. They're incentivized to build these transmission lines because they make 9 to 11% on a transmission line. They don't make it in fixing our infrastructure here that's already outdated. And they've also spent a huge amount of time opposing any kind of renewable energy bills before the legislature every time, and before the PUC. So they have not been good neighbors before, and they're not going to be good neighbors later. They're taking a lot of money out of our economy, and they're providing power to Massachusetts. They talk about this being clean and green, and I have you will see a link to Roger Wheeler's talk from the Friends of Sebago Lake. He's done an incredible job of putting together peer-reviewed science that looks at these reservoirs. The ecological destruction of reservoirs is enormous. Just to begin with, the carbon sequestration loss of the boreal forest is enormous. And we can't have carbon sequestration in the forest when they are covered by reservoirs. The riverine habitat is destroyed. They disrupt the riverine cycles, which impacts the biota and particularly the diatoms, which are the food source for all the fisheries in in the ocean, and so it also in the riverine system. So anything from the bottom of the food chain on up, it depends on there being diatoms, and there's die-off proven by these mega dams. If say no wins, they will build more dams. So they are planning more dams. They have 16 to 22 dams planned. I just want to say that the methane production on the reservoirs is huge. Methane is 86 times more impactful than carbon as a greenhouse gas, and you can see the methane from space. So it's not like I'm making it up. Methyl mercury poisoning develops in the reservoirs as rotting vegetative matter occurs, and that follows up the food chain so that it makes the food poisonous. It's a neurotoxin, and it's problematic for everyone. Next slide. This quote, "Don't you people know how to turn off your lights?" Roberta Benefiel is, there will be a link to some of her information. CMP Hydro-Quebec in their application said alternatives do not exist. There were no alternatives analysis, which is a big part of what an environmental analysis should be doing, and they just left it blank. There is nothing. However, there are plenty of alternatives. It's first of all, efficiency. And every one of us can be more efficient. We need to use our resources more efficiently. We are in a climate crisis, and they are they're building dams that are enormous. Just the cement alone is 6% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So first, we've got to be efficient. We should not be using these giant mega dams, and we shouldn't allow them to build anymore. We could be building microgrids locally. Those are much more secure, keeps money in the local economy, and actually also would support renewable energy, which CMP Hydro-Quebec, have advocated against. They do not want to include them. As you know, there are many solar farms that have not been allowed to come online because CMP is not allowing them to come online. They're not upgrading the connections to those. So we should build out renewables. We should upgrade our existing grid, which will actually improve the efficiency of our grid. We will lose less energy. And they should have been doing that all along instead of building this ginormous transmission line. Next slide. The impact on the Indigenous peoples of Canada is sinful, horrible. They have lost their world. They cannot find their medicines. These people have lived there 15,000 years. And if we buy their electricity, we are going to cause genocide among them. They have had abundance forever because they have carefully managed their resources. They use seasonal available foods. Everyone in their communities used to have a job. Rita Rosmonias, who quoted this to me and who we brought to Maine, said, her grandson said, when you grew up, everybody had a job. No one was hungry. Now, 20% of the people in the communities have jobs seasonally because Hydro-Quebec, has gone in, destroyed their livelihoods. So 20% of them do a little work for the power companies, but 80% of them have no jobs. They're dependent on the government provided food, which is flown in a pound of hamburger, $15 a pound. There are, and the rest of it is Doritos, et cetera. It's not good food for them, and they're unhealthy, and they don't get electricity. The lands were taken illegally. So, if we vote no, we are saying it's okay to destroy their lives. 16 to 22 more dams will be built if we vote yes, because that will open the floodgates. We do not need more power from Canada. We need to be developing our own, and we need to be using everything we have more efficiently. That's a heat pump, by the way. It's the only thing that heats my house.
Becky, what we'd like to do is if you could just spend the next minute sort of wrapping up. I hate to interrupt you, but we want to make sure that we have time for the no side and then
Thank you. I know. Thank you for giving me extra time. I want to say that CMP, the mega dams are early 20th century technology all over the world. More than 2/3 of the world's rivers have been dammed. This is an outmoded, beyond useful technology. We need to move into the 21st century. Can you go to the slide with my links just so people know? If you want to see about dams, Dam Nation is a fantastic film. The Patagonia's Chenard article is great. There's a film about Manitoba that is also Indigenous peoples. If you want to see our lawsuit, happy to provide that. And somewhere here, oh dear, is here we go. Roger Wheeler. This talk is fantastic. It was done last night at Marion Meeting Bay, and it gives you the science behind what's going on with the mega dams. This has been suppressed over the last 80 years, and they're just trying to continue to suppress this science, but it is terrible what these dams are doing to our world, and it is increasing the heat of the ocean. So I hope you will all vote yes, because we should not rely on this power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky. Just as a reminder, we'll make all of this material available to you at the end of this session. So let's just take a little bit of a breath. Somebody might want to get a glass of water. Somebody else might want to get a glass of wine. And we will just take a second and let me, while you're doing all of that, let me introduce Lincoln Jeffers, known to those who know and love him as Link. He's the Economic and Community Development Director for the City of Lewiston. And during his tenure, the city has had more than, almost $1 billion invested in economic development projects that have created more than 4,000 jobs, new jobs, and almost 2,000 retained jobs. His background is a undergraduate at Middlebury College, and he's done some graduate work in economic and community development at the Muskie School of Public Service. So you're looking right now at Link Jeffries. But while I'm here, let me just introduce Ben Dudley, who's the director of Mainers for Clean Energy Jobs, which you may or may not know is a coalition of businesses, labor unions, trade associations, and various esteemed environmental leaders that has been formed to advocate in support of the Clean Energy Corridor. Ben has been a state legislator from Portland from 98 to 2006, and he's been the chair and CEO of the Maine Democratic Party in 2006 and 2007. So we welcome Link Jeffers and Ben Dudley to our discussion today, and they will represent the no side. So I believe, Link, are you going to move first?
I will, and thank you again to the Lincoln County Democrats and Jan for coordinating this. And I must say, I've been aware of this project for a long time. I've been involved with it, but not nearly to the depth that Ben Dudley and Becky and Sandy have been. So, but I think just hearing that last presentation sort of made me what started me with this is. I know when I first started hearing about this, I started telling friends, hey, I'm working on this project, Clean Energy Connect. It's going to bring new power down from Canada, and there's going to be a big investment in Lewiston. And I'd start talking about it and go, oh, is that what all those say no to the corridor? I had no idea what those signs were all about. So there's been a lot of rhetoric. There's been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of fury. So I've been back and forth, and I think a lot of complications. I think people are getting tired of what they're seeing in the paper, what they're hearing on the news, and all these back and forth, these forums. So I said, let me, if I were to approach this, how would I want to do it? And I think the key questions to be asked to everybody is, do you believe climate change is real? If you believe it is real, do you really think something concrete needs to be done about it instead of just talking about it and all the rhetoric? There was just a lot of discussion. We're talking about a corridor running through a portion of Maine, and we just heard about dams being built all over the world. And now this was a domino effect related to that. Let's focus on the issue at hand, which is a corridor being built through Maine that's connecting Hydro-Quebec to the New England grid in Lewiston. So to say that all this power is going to Canada, or excuse me, to Boston or Massachusetts is absolutely untrue. When it hits the grid, in Lewiston, it becomes part of the ISO New England power supply. And whatever power is taken, it's not like that atom generated up in a dam up in Canada lands in Boston. And only then can it be distributed around Massachusetts. It comes to Lewiston. It's part of the ISO New England grid, and it's there for all takers. So to get into some of the details, this is going to be delivering 1,200 megawatts of clean renewable energy. That's a little bit more than what actually Maine Yankee used to produce. It'll be coming to Lewiston as direct current, which is the way it travels best. So you have the least loss of power as it's being transmitted. When it gets to Lewiston, it's alternating current, and that's what we all use in our homes. It's great that Massachusetts is paying 100% of the cost of this. This is also the equivalent. We talked about greenhouse gas emissions. There's a great debate. Does it save greenhouse gas emissions? Does it not? It is the equivalent of 700,000 cars being taken off the road. CMP's initial study, when they first made the application, made a statement to that effect. The opponents did not believe it. They created their own study. They brought forth a study that said, no, dams release all sorts of, the impoundments behind them release all sorts of greenhouse gas emissions as the vegetation deteriorates and rots beneath it. And they quoted studies that were done in tropical climates, which are warm, and the water has less oxygen in it. And it's a very heavily vegetated area when you build in a tropical climate. These are boreal forests. They tended to be lower quality forests, lower vegetation levels. It's a cold, very oxygenated level. So in the early years of the dams being built, the water being impounded, the levels of greenhouse gas emissions are higher than they are after a 5 or 6 or 7 year period, at which point it deteriorates dramatically. Even in the early years, it is less than what you would get from burning fossil fuels. So even right out of the gate, it's better than what's currently happening, and it only gets better over time. There's been much debate about the cutting of the Maine woods, and that they're going to devastate this pristine wilderness. I was glad to hear Sandy note that, hey, look, this is a working forest, and it is a working forest. I was glad to hear that. But let's put it in perspective. The amount that is going to be clear cut in the new section of the corridor, the 53 miles of corridor, that is less than 1% of what is cut in the Maine woods annually. It's 0.3% of what's cut in the Maine woods annually. Those were all this noise is about they're devastating the North Woods. To put it in perspective for those of you in Lincoln County, Hog Island is about 300 acres. That 53 miles of clear cut is, I think, 320 acres. So it's very comparable, and that's spread over 53 miles. And so I think let's put it in perspective that what they're saying is ruining the North Woods. It's a very, very, very small area that's really being impacted. Are there visual impacts from a distance? There are. Is that going to absolutely devastate the economy? I do not believe that is the case. And there have been issues taken over time. I want to be sensitive with Ben. I know Ben has a lot to say here as well. And we want to get to questions. Let me.
Got plenty of time.
I'm doing okay. Okay.
Keep going. Yeah.
Keep going. I think it's important that, really greenhouse gases are an existential threat. This is the biggest challenge of our lifetime. And to simply talk about it and say all the reasons we shouldn't do it, this is a real project. It is a tangible project. There is water, the dams in Canada, in the recent past, they have been spilling water unused because the dams filled up and they had no more, they couldn't store any more water. So they are spilling dams. So to say that there is not enough energy up there and that the waters that we're going to be taking, Hydro-Quebec is going to be taking power they're currently selling to someone else. and sending it to Canada or sending it to New England is just not true. They are spilling water. They've got excess capacity. Do they plan to build more dams in the future? They may. That is a battle for the future. And they will need to go through the same permitting process that this project has gone through, which has been exhaustive. To say that the public hasn't had a comment, they've tried to do this under the cover of darkness. There have been a couple of years of review by professionals who are hired to do this. This is not the sort of project that should be determined in a public forum. It should not be subject to politics. It should really be evaluated on its merits. And CMP put forth all the criteria that needed to be put forth. It was reviewed by staff at the PUC, and that is their job. They work for the people of Maine. They don't work for CMP. They don't work for NRCM. They don't work for the Sierra Club. They don't work for the fossil fuel generators. They work for the people of Maine, and their job is to protect the interests of the people of Maine and evaluate projects on their merits. Forget about all the rhetoric. Unequivocally, after 18 months of study, 31 interveners having the opportunity to ask questions on every iota of their application, lots of public process, Army Corps of Engineers, let me stay on the PUC. After 18 months, unequivocally, the staff and the commissioners of the PUC determined this project by far had much greater positive impacts than negative impacts, and they voted 100% in favor. Each of the subsequent federal and state agencies came to the same conclusion. This has been evaluated by professionals, they're engineers, they're biologists, they're attorneys. They're, these are the people who know this business. This is not really something that should be played out in the public. Certainly people have opinions and their opinions should be heard, and they have been heard. But the people who evaluated, who really know the mechanics of how all these things work, have determined, despite what's being suggested by our opponents, they have come to the conclusion that this project by far has greater benefits than detriments, and they have voted to support it. The opponents have just lined up and thrown every roadblock possible, have tried to delay it, kill it by delay. And that's one of the reasons why, I'm not sure if it was Sandy or Becky who suggested that CMP was not willing to allow another study. Oh, that was one thing I had forgotten. That is one thing I had forgotten. Sorry, Ben, that was me. You told me to give you, I could talk no more than 10 minutes. That's now done. Phone's winning. I'm not sure how to turn it off. I lost my train of thought. And I'm sure we'll have the opportunity when the questions come. My time is officially up. Let me turn it back over to you and we'll have the opportunity then.
Great. Thank you, Lenk. And I see that if we're doing equal time, that we have about 10 minutes left. Is that right, Jan?
Yes, that's about right. Yep.
Great, thank you.
We're trying to we want to be equitable here. So I think we've got, probably 10-ish. So I know that you've got some charts. So
great, yeah. And yeah, hopefully I won't have to use all that time. So let me just get my screen sharing going here. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yep, great. So thank you all, Jan in particular and Autumn. It's not my first time speaking to the Lincoln County Democrats, but it's been quite a few years and I'm happy to be back and I'm grateful for the opportunity to present our perspective. We hold that the choice before Maine voters is very clear. Do we want to lead on clean energy, bringing new benefits to our communities? Excuse me a second, a little technological problem. So we hold that the choice before Maine voters is clear. Do we want to lead on clean energy? creating hundreds of new jobs with significant new benefits for local communities? Or do we want to pass far-reaching, dangerous, and retroactive laws that were written by and for the oil and gas industry? That's the choice we'll be discussing tonight, and that's why we hold that voters should vote no on question 1. And just mentioning briefly our slide here, President Biden, in his joint address to Congress in April, spoke of the urgency of creating thousands of miles of transmission lines that we need to build a resilient and fully clean grid. And he was responding to urging from a number of climate-interested NGOs, including the Sierra Club, which urged President Biden to consider to include tax incentives for the construction of high voltage transmission lines in his American Jobs Plan, which he did do, which is now still under fierce debate because of opponents to climate and opponents to President Biden. I want to just set the stage here a little bit. 97% of the funding for question 1 comes from 3 of Maine's worst carbon polluters. They formed a political action committee called Mainers for Local Power. Mainers for Local Power is a grouping of 3 major polluters: NextEra, which owns the oil-fired power plant on Cousins Island; Calpine, which owns the natural gas-fired power plant in Westbrook; and Vistra, which owns a natural gas-fired power plant in Vesey. These 3 companies, on the petition circulation effort alone, spent $1.5 million just to qualify the question for the ballot, which is just an incredible amount of money for petition circulation effort. I've never seen anything like it. Again, they funded 97% of the campaign, which is now spent over $10 million. The question that they're proposing is dangerous and far-reaching. It has 3 retroactive components. And this notion of retroactivity included in this kind of legislation violates the rules of basic fairness found on every playground. You don't change the rules in the middle of the game, let alone when the game is over and construction has already begun. It's true that retroactive laws have been passed on other issues, but there's no precedent for a retroactive law being passed after a $1 billion construction project is months into operation and employing hundreds of Maine workers. Nothing like it. And it's no casual thing to propose to do that. And I also want to observe that there are other projects that get caught in the net of question 1. Question 1 is not a narrowly tailored question. It impacts at least 2 other projects that we know of from the past that will now be subject to legislative review after they've been in operation for years. And it also has implications for clean energy projects in the future, projects that we haven't envisioned yet, and projects that may, frankly, be a little scared away by the way we're handling our referendum process, by fossil fuel energy producers using our referendum process as a weapon, as an anti-competitive weapon in their effort to keep churning out carbon pollution. There are also these are exactly the kinds of unintended consequences that I think we need to carefully consider before accepting question 1. So in doing all of this, sort of stopping the project that Link laid out that does so much good for our economy and for climate change, for reducing climate emissions, in stopping all of this, question 1 offers us almost nothing in return. If you pass question 1, it gives us no new clean energy. It provides 0 reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. It provides no protection of Maine wildlife and Maine ecosystems. It doesn't provide a single job. In fact, there's no measurable economic benefit from passing question 1 to anyone except 3 of Maine's worst carbon polluters. Question 1 was written behind closed doors by these very same oil and gas lobbyists. And unlike the Clean Energy Corridor, that process included no opportunity for public comment, no independent scrutiny of any kind. Question 1 wasn't subject to a single public hearing before voters are being asked to decide on it up or down. And frankly, as I've already alluded, it's a naked attempt by the oil and gas industry to just take out the competition. So the question we have to ask ourselves tonight is why? Why are some of Maine's worst carbon polluters willing to go to such lengths to stop this project, regardless of consequences? And the simple answer is that if they defeat the clean energy corridor, their industry gets to continue, as I said, churning out carbon pollution that will help them avoid $1 billion in losses over just the first 15 years of the operation of the clean energy corridor. So for our energy future, for our economic future, and for our future energy security, we must vote no on question 1. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Link. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Becky. Nice job. Now we have, I'm sure, because I'm feeling this too, there were many questions that I began to formulate as I was listening to all of the speakers, but we have decided that just to make sure that we can sort of zero in on some of the most intense questions that people had on their minds prior to this presentation, we would ask those questions to be submitted in advance, which we've done. So what I have done in the time that we have remaining, and I think we build this event to be a 6:30 to 7:30 event, but the speakers have graciously agreed to stay beyond if the conversation continued. So anyone who would like to stay on will just continue for, a few extra minutes. But I'm just going to try to, just cut to the chase on some of these. And this is for the no team. Very succinct question that was submitted. Who exactly profits from this project?
Maine consumers profit in the terms of a $496 million benefit in reduced energy prices. Certainly the companies that construct it, Central Maine Power and Hydro-Quebec, and Maine communities also benefit. I think Link can speak particularly powerfully about the benefit to the community that he represents.
Well, I could, and again, we're sort of focused on money. I think we all benefit, just we got cleaner air. That's the deal. That's what, to me, that's the biggest benefit. I mean, Lewiston, yes, my employer, we will get out of that $1 billion project being paid for entirely by Massachusetts. Lewiston will end up with about $6 million of new tax revenue every year. There are other communities that will also benefit. Lewiston was the big winner, kind of got the golden apple out of $1 billion project. 250 million of it will be in Lewiston. But that, I supported this project long before I realized such big benefits to my community. It's just, it makes sense.
One added thing that I want to tack on here is that this project is the result of public policies that were specifically designed to attract private investment. Maine and most other states, including Massachusetts and New Hampshire and Vermont and the rest of the New England states, have specific public policies that are designed to attract this, to sort of bring market forces to bear in trying to solve the climate problem. And so the question sort of suggests that there's somehow something bad with a private industry seeing an opportunity for advantage in investing in a clean energy project here. When in fact, it's reason for us all to be encouraged that private industry is now taking an interest as a result of public policies that were designed to do this. They're taking an interest in investing in major clean energy projects. This is a huge part of the solution for a major problem that we only have 30 years to fix, which is a blink of the eye.
And may the yes side respond?
Yes,
Becky, you want to
Becky,
take
go
that?
ahead.
I just want to say that CMP and Hydro-Quebec have never promised any pricing on the energy that they're going to provide, and they're looking at providing peaker energy, which is the most expensive energy that there is. So there is no testimony that I am aware of that has made any promise before the PUC, the DEP, or the Army Corps of Engineers that promises from Hydro-Quebec how much they are going to charge us. And so I think that's a specious argument.
Yes,
But
and
that's a matter of record.
Corporations that are making money on this. So Hydro-Quebec stands to profit 12.5 billion. That's going to the government of Quebec. CMP and Spanish shareholders tend to profit 2.9 billion, while Mainers average 9 cents off their bill per month. That is pennies. And if you think about the recent PUC rate hike for CMP, that's already been washed out. The other thing I would add real quick, Jen, I'll get back to you, is CMP and Hydro-Quebec have already spent $54 million to promote this project, when that money could have gone to upgrading the current infrastructure, because we all know that Maine's a blackout capital of the United States. This project is not going to improve power reliability, and it's going to make power restoration times a lot longer. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you. This next question, and it wasn't my intent to have us go back and forth. As I told the speakers, this is not a debate, but as long as you all are feeling okay with responding to each other's response, I'm okay with it. One question that I myself have had that was submitted was, why did Vermont and New Hampshire both reject the corridor in their states? So I had this as a response of the yes team. So maybe you can begin.
Yeah, so New Hampshire rejected it because it would not reduce greenhouse gas emissions and a multitude of other environmental problems. While I don't believe this source of power is going to help our effort to combat climate change, and we can look back to Becky's testimony here tonight, the Vermont project is approved. It's fully permitted. It's shovel ready. Ratepayers in Vermont were mitigated much more than the Maine project. But why does CMP and Hydro-Quebec, mostly CMP, not want Vermont to get the project? Is because those profits would go to another utility. So if you believe that the source of the power is going to help the ISO New England grid, then Maine doesn't have to bear the burden. That project is ready to be underground in Vermont now.
I would like to respond to that. The New Hampshire project, was rejected not over climate issues. It was rejected because it proposed to cross significant conservation land, including national forest and federal wildlife areas, and it was determined to be too disruptive to the communities that it went through. That's why it was rejected. Whereas the New England Clean Energy Connect crosses no federal national forests, no wildlife lands. There are none of those implications. It crosses 145 miles of territory, 92 miles of which is existing transmission corridor, the remaining 53 miles of which, this is a direct quote from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, mostly consists of commercial timberland, heavily logged commercial timberland. So there's a very big difference there. And also with respect to Vermont, Vermont's a good project. It wasn't selected here, but it's a good project. And here's what we need to recognize is that the New England Clean Energy Connect by itself gets us about 5% of the way where we need to go in terms of decarbonizing the entire region. We need the New England Clean Energy Connect, we need the Vermont project, and we need two others, at least of that scale, of baseload electricity that can supply electricity when the wind isn't blowing and when the sun isn't shining, to deal with the intermittent nature of other renewables. It's not a Vermont or Maine question. It's a Vermont and Maine question.
I'm just going to say that begs the question that this supply of energy is actually greenhouse gas producing, and the impact on our oceans is also causing the oceans to warm. So the Arctic sea ice is melting as a result of these dams up in James Bay and Hudson Bay and across the whole Arctic. So I think you need to get your facts straight. That's not true.
I'd be delighted to talk to you about the facts there, Becky. In fact, the former lead greenhouse gas scientist at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute debunked the very studies that you're mentioning there. I'm happy to share with you the wealth of peer-reviewed research that I have access to that's recent as this year, that speaks to the low carbon nature of of electricity generated in Quebec. And it's low carbon for the very reasons that Link already discussed.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, here's one that, let me just keep going here so we can get as many questions in as possible. And just to reiterate, if I neglected to mention it before, I think I did, that at the end of this session, we'll do a quick poll to see whether or not, what your thoughts are as a result of this discussion. But this is for the no people initially, the no guys. Will the addition of the new line provide Maine the opportunity to shut down less efficient fossil fuel generation plants? And the example that was given in this question is the W.F. Wyman, I guess, plant that's located on Cousins Island in Casco Bay. This is for the no guys.
Absolutely. I mean, it will make those. I mean, Ben has been more in the weeds on this stuff, but from my understanding that, all of a sudden producing power from fossil fuels will be too expensive. This power will come in at a lower cost and will keep those from coming online. And I think it was 4 plants that were expected to retire over the next few years as well, Ben.
Yeah. I mean, we can't. I'm not going to sit here and tell you we can draw a direct line between building the Clean Energy Connect and closing the power plant on Cousins Island. But I'll tell you this: Next Era Energy, the #1 contributor to this campaign, to the Yes campaign, owns and operates the Wyman station on Cousins Island in Casco Bay. They also own and operate the Seabrook nuclear power plant in New Hampshire. They see a direct threat to their business interests from the construction of the Clean Energy Connect, and that's what justifies the $10 million that their campaign has spent.
Okay, thank you. This is for the yes people. If question 1 is adopted, how will businesses that seek to invest in Maine have confidence that their projects can move forward after receiving all the necessary permits? I think this refers to the concern about the retroactivity.
Sure, I think that's a great question, Jan. One thing we want to think about is if the CMP corridor goes through, this is going to cause extreme suppression of solar expansion in Maine. So that's already talking about job losses and true renewable development right in Maine. Because of the 1,200 megawatts that Link talked about, it's going to flood the market, and at the Maine-New Hampshire interface, it's also going to cause a backup, if you will, or a plug, which will suppress the biomass industry. So these are 2 renewable industries in Maine that have generators. CMP Corridor will result in a net job loss. So it has 38 sustainable jobs at the end of construction, while hundreds to thousands of jobs are lost that are currently full-time jobs now. We already have a labor shortage anyway. Maine's a net exporter of energy. So when we talk about retroactivity, why is it in there? In 2020, Tom Saviello and some of our other grassroots members filed this citizens initiative to the Secretary of State. And last September 2020, we put CMP and Hydro-Quebec on notice to let them know that we were planning to have this vote in November. At that time, they did not have all of their permits in place. They had not started construction. And so for them to move ahead with construction, trying to pose as we're too big to fail for that project, it's simply not true. We've put them on notice, and they're taking a huge financial risk with their foreign shareholders by putting this project, by working on the clear cut now, because they don't have all of the right of way. And this vote is pending. The other retroactivity component goes back to 2014, and that's when CMP obtained their illegal lease from the Bureau of Parks and Lands. The only project that got a lease between 2014 and now that would be impacted is the CMP corridor. Now Ben's going to get fidgety because there are 2 other leases since that time that have been put in, but they would not be considered from this referendum. So one of those is an Aroostook County lease, and that's just basically communication on an existing infrastructure. You access it by an ATV. It's grandfathered because it was originally given way before the 2014, and it's just been renewed. The other project is at Christian Camps in Jackman. The owner of that lease contacted me this week and is very upset that CMP is bringing that lease into this discussion because it is an underground line of about 900 to 1,000 feet. I've seen this land. It's completely full forest growth. It looks untouched. And to compare that with 100-foot wide swath at 53.5 miles is just unfounded.
So I need to respond to much of that. Starting with the lease issues, there are other leases impacted. Sandy just conceded that. Regardless of how the owners might feel about the clean energy corridor, the fact is that their leases are now directly subject to securing a 2/3 legislative vote. Why we would want the legislature making decisions that claw back the leases from the very people that Sandy mentions is madness. So, you know, the question is, why do we want to upset other projects? Why did question 1, why is it worded the way it is? Why wasn't it worded more carefully? Why doesn't it say that it is strictly related to the New England Clean Energy Connect? Now, regarding her comments about jobs, she made a forceful presentation, but I will observe that is completely divorced from all of the jobs conclusions that the Public Utilities Commission made after 18 months of study. The Public Utilities Commission concerned that any implications for the biomass industry have nothing to do with the Clean Energy Corridor. They reached the conclusion that the New England Clean Energy Connect would generate 1,600 jobs on average during the construction period. And because of the positive economic benefits and the direct employment by the project, it would result in 300 jobs annually going forward. These are not my conclusions. These are the conclusions of the impartial Public Utilities Commission, a state agency that was established to impartially look at these questions. And I can't help but observe every single one of the 3 commissioners was supported by Tom Saviello, her partner in her PAC, when he was in the state Senate. These were expert and impartial leaders who voted in support of the project because they reached impartial conclusions.
And if I could just very briefly,
Okay, let me just continue. Oh, Link. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as I had stated, that this was not to be a debate, and I know it's hard to not respond to each other. But let's get a couple more questions in. So this is for the no people. Obviously, some Maine jobs will be created if the corridor is built. Those will presumably be short-term jobs. What, if any, permanent jobs will be created to run, maintain, support the corridor in the long term?
So I just mentioned that actually.
Sorry.
The conclusions of the Independent Public Utilities Commission are that during the 5-year construction period, that the project will support 1,600 jobs on average. There'll actually be a period with it exceeds that number. I can also observe that right now there are over 400 Maine workers working on the project. It's the majority of the workers on the project. They're working directly on the project. They're Maine workers, over 70%, and over 200 of them are union members. And then going forward, once we're in the operations period, for 2 reasons, it will generate 300 jobs, sustain 300 jobs going forward. There are 38 jobs that are related directly to the operations of the project, and then another 260 jobs that are supported by the massive positive economic impact from the lower energy prices and extra spending in Maine's economy. 7 leading Maine economists concluded that over the first 15 years of the operation of this project, the total economic impact on the state of Maine will be $1.3 billion. That adds a lot of money into the economy that supports jobs.
Okay. Let's just go with one more question. I want to make this an equitable thing, equitable discussion. Here's one. Yes, maybe you guys can start with this one. Let's call this the last question, because we want to get that poll in. And then I did have a couple of questions where people were asking for, where are all the details? So Autumn has been putting in links to various pieces of information that you could check on for additional detail if you want to dive into the weeds on some of this. Here is one, and this is for yes. Had any party, actually it could be both of you, yes first, had any party considered routing Hydro-Quebec lines to Lac Mégantic and then east to Jackman following the CP Railroad, and then south following US Route 201 southeast to West Forks? So obviously this person has a sense of what's going on. So on the yes team, any thoughts about that? Or are you familiar with what that route might look like?
Well, I know what came up in the DEP proceedings, and it was the question of the alternatives analysis that Becky alluded to earlier. The question about this line going along Route 201, which is a scenic byway. It's a major road in that region, or to underground the line. I think back to when all of the opposition started, and I wonder if the environmental impacts, because they would be reduced with the buried line, if that might have satisfied people and we wouldn't be here today. But that's not the case. And why is that? Because CMP chose the cheapest route so they could win that bid for Massachusetts. Becky, do you want to add anything there?
Well, first of all, I just want to have an opportunity to say that, number one, I do not, and Sierra Club does not take funding from any oil companies or gas companies. So and we have been fighting this battle for a long time. We are in a lawsuit against the Army Corps of Engineers and the DOE. And I resent the fact that you bring that up. Also, the amount of money that your side has spent in enormous pieces of mail that come to everybody every day. I even live at a municipal power. I have a municipal power company. Why are you sending it to me? But anyway, I think you've gone overboard on this money thing, because you have way outspent by at least 4 times what the oil and gas folks have done. And, not happy about peaker plants. And I think Cousins Island is, going to have to get shut down. But meanwhile, the fastest growing industry in Maine is solar and wind industry. And you will suppress that. Those are people who are well-trained jobs who work here. Many of the people that CMP has hired for this project do not live in Maine. They live from out of state. Many of the license plates have been changed, but we've seen pictures that you can laugh all you want, but that has happened up there. So, I think the job thing is specious argument. I think the 236 jobs or whatever you just said, is not going to replace the other jobs that are being lost. So, to take jobs lost. And I know about the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. I just want to say, consider the source, because they refuse to look at the impact of the Arctic. And I tried to talk to them about it. So I know they did.
Well, first I want to be clear, the Gulf of Maine Research Institute has not taken a position on this issue. But the matters that you brought up about the climate impacts downstream of these rivers, of these dammed rivers in Quebec, were discussed by a former greenhouse climate scientist with GMRI, who debunked them, along with another scientist from the Bigelow Labs. But on the spending issue, I'm glad we're talking about that. The companies that are responding to the public policy that is seeking to harness markets to solve the climate problem, or at least be part of the solution. They didn't seek this referendum. They're responding to public policy. They're initiating this project in keeping with public policy as thoroughly reviewed by Maine regulators and approved. And their competitor, their main competitors for energy production in New England, came forward with a ballot question using our referendum law as a business tool to stop competitors from bringing clean energy into the market. I don't begrudge anybody from defending their interests in that way. They're responding to a public demand for clean energy, and a competitor comes in, some of the worst carbon polluters in the state come in and say, we don't want to compete with your clean energy. We're going to try and stop you. I have no problem with them spending to try and protect the public interest in building clean energy connection.
So let's also remind folks who are going to the ballot box, the source of funding for Mainers for Fair Laws. You might see Adrienne Bennett. She's the paid spokesperson for them. They are fully funded by Clean Energy Matters, who is fully funded by CMP. So we want to think about, can we trust CMP? Who else is a paid spokesperson who has money derived from CMP? And that's Ben Dudley for Mainers for Clean Energy Jobs. So when you're receiving mailers or seeing these commercials, keep in mind there are many organizations funded by CMP to push forward their rhetoric. And the last thing I would say is no CMP corridor. The majority of donors to our PAC are grassroots. And some of you, thank you very much. This year, we've received 430 small dollar donations. Now that's to the tune of about $30 each. So you can imagine this massive grassroots effort that we have shaped that's unified all across the political spectrum. I'm a Democrat, but people who are in our group, the grassroots group, are all across the political spectrum from all across the state. They've put in their personal money. I've volunteered my time for the last 3 years. So it's a David and Goliath situation. And I've always said we welcome the help. I'm so glad we have folks and coalition partners from NRCM, Sierra Club, Maine's major environmental organizations. Are other utilities against this project too? Yes, that's for their own interests. We may have various reasons that we oppose the corridor, but we all want the same end game, to vote yes on one to reject the corridor. And maybe we won't be partners on the next issue, but we're going up against CMP and Hydro-Quebec, and they have bottomless pockets.
Sandy.
Okay, on that note, what I'd like to do, Ben, I want to give
seconds. Sandy, you failed to disclose that your number one funder of the $328,000 your PAC has raised, $310,000 of it came from the 3 worst carbon polluting sources in the state of Maine, 3 of the worst carbon polluters in the state of Maine.
Actually, all of those records have been.
Okay, and that will be the last word on our question and answer. What I'd like to do now is give each of the sides 2 minutes for a quick recap, and I will hold you to those 2 minutes. So you guys determine who's going to make that talk, and then we'll just launch right into the poll. So let's have the no.
Could no go first, because we definitely did not get as much time during the question. So I'd like no to go first.
I was going to suggest that the no go first, but that's fine.
And Ben, I think you can take the lead on. I just want to show you one quick thing, and then I'll give the bulk of the time to you. As far as alternative energy sources, solar and wind, we need all of the above. Let's not say we're putting a damper on this. I can tell you in Lewiston, we have had 6 or 7 projects come through just this year on solar. So that industry is thriving. Last point on that, all of those start building industrial scale power. They need to put a power line to get it to market. Are you guys going to oppose that as well? Ben, I turn that over to you.
Thanks, Link. I'll also be brief. This is complicated stuff. And my guess is that, when you hear from the 2 sides in this kind of environment, it's not entirely helpful. And so I want to suggest to you that there are independent sources of information for you to review. Public regulators that spent years reviewing this single project. The Public Utilities Commission, the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, the Land Use Planning Commission, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and the United States Department of Energy. They thoroughly investigated this project and heard virtually all of the claims that were raised by Sandy and Becky, and they each produced thorough reports justifying their reasons for authorizing this project, for permitting it to go forward. I would suggest that we're in an era where too often the experts that serve the public interest, of institutions that were created to protect our interests and to understand these issues as thoroughly as they can, because we can't do it ourselves. I would suggest that we need to get back to a time when we rebuild trust in these institutions. These are not nameless, faceless people, bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. These are folks that are our neighbors. These are folks who live in Maine, who may come from Maine originally, but stay here because they love it every bit as much as we do. And they, to an agency,
Thank you very much, Ben.
it's in the public interest to build this
Let me
project.
Thank you very much. Okay, yes, side.
Yes, so we know the CMP corridor.
Sandy or Becky, I'm not sure.
Awesome. Sorry, there's a delay. So we know the CMP corridor is 145 miles long. It's going to blaze 100-foot wide clear cut through 53.5 miles in western Maine. That's approximately the distance from Portland to Augusta. This is the last contiguous temperate forest east of the Mississippi. It's a globally significant forest that we want to protect from irreparable harm, especially for Maine's wetlands, waterways, and wildlife habitat. We know that's the last stronghold for native brook trout. It would cross Maine state heritage fish waters, critical wintering yards for deer and bird habitat. It would forever damage Maine public lands. We know the CMP corridor is not going to help us in our continued fight to combat climate change. Becky talked about Hydro-Quebec's flooding of First Nations people's land has caused a cultural genocide and pushed these communities into third world living conditions. So we don't want to be complicit with that, and that's why Mainers should vote yes on 1 to reject that. There's not been an environmental impact statement, and it's important for Mainers to know that the CMP corridor is not a done deal. There's federal and state permit appeals, the public lands lease is out, there's pending court cases, municipal permits, and this vote. The bottom line is, simply put, Mainers don't trust CMP. This is the worst rated utility in the nation for 3 consecutive years. Mainers have had enough of CMP's overbilling, poor customer service, decades-long influence to stop true renewables. So if you want to defeat the CMP corridor, vote yes in November to reject it at the polls.
Thank you so much, Sandy, Lincoln, Becky, and Ben. You guys were terrific. And I want to thank the speakers once again for jumping in. We put this together on fairly short notice, and the speakers were just terrific in adjusting schedules to join us. So thank you all again. If there are any questions, comments, remember you can always send a note to info@lincolncountydemocrats.com.